everyone. Thank you for joining for tonight's event. My name is Rachel and I'm a marketing coordinator here at Powell's Books. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com. In the coming weeks, we're looking forward to welcoming Carlos Fonseca, Matt Ruff in conversation with Christopher Moore, and Zach St. George. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you haven't already done so, you can sign up for our weekly events email at powells.com. Tonight, we are honored to welcome Craig Hill and Matt Wastradowski. Craig has a strong track record in Washington's outdoor community. The National Park Service honored him in 2011 for improving public education of Mount Rainier National Park. Craig is the outdoor sports chairman for the Tacoma Pierce County Sport Hall of Fame. He lives in the shadow of Rainier with his wife, 2 kids, and Largent the adventure dog, who will be making a cameo later tonight. Matt Wastradowski is a travel and outdoors writer based in Portland, Oregon. Whether on assignment or just for fun, chances are good he's doing something that deepens his passion and enthusiasm for the Beaver State and the broader Pacific Northwest. Matt has written for a variety of publications, including Outside, REI's co-op blog, Willamette Week, and Northwest Travel and Life. Hill and Wastradowski lead the way with their book, Moon Pacific Northwest Hiking. Towering peaks, sparkling coastline, and vast old-growth forests, wherever you turn in the Pacific Northwest, adventure awaits. Pack a lunch, lace up your boots, and hit the trail with Moon Pacific Northwest Hiking. This evening's event will also include a Q&A. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question. If someone has typed a question that you'd also like to know the answer to, please consider upvoting that particular question. Most importantly, please consider supporting Craig and Matt and Powell's by purchasing a copy of their book. A link to buy the book was included in your registration email and will also be shared in the chat a few times this evening. And without any further ado, please welcome Craig and Matt.
Hey, everybody. We're going to get this started here real quick. All right. So we prepared a little presentation here to get us started this evening. This is our book. This is what our book looks like: Pacific Northwest Hiking. It's been about a 2-year project for us. My name is. See, let me get this thing working here. My name is Craig Hill. I spent about 13 years working at the News Tribune as an outdoor writer. I started my career as a sports writer, doing freelance assignments for organizations like ESPN, the Sporting News, CBS Sportsline. But I covered the NFL, Super Bowls, the Olympics, and a lot of other sports for the News Tribune for quite a while. Until their outdoor job opened. When their outdoor job came available, I was pretty excited about that. Hopped on that opportunity and spent 13 years as the outdoor writer for the News Tribune in Tacoma and for the McClatchy newspaper chain, where we would our outdoor coverage would go all over the country. So that was a blast. As you may have heard, local newspapers not doing so well right now. So our outdoor coverage was eliminated several years ago. And I left the News Tribune about 2 years ago at just about within an hour of the time I signed the deal to write this book. So let me pass you along to my beloved co-author here.
Greg. Yeah, my name is Matt Wastradowski. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It's a very beautiful night here, at least in Portland, and clearly up where Craig is. So thanks for taking the time and spending an hour with us. We really appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm Matt Wastradowski. I've been a writer since I graduated from college about 15 years ago. I've been in daily newspaper. I've written for daily newspapers, online publications. I started writing about the outdoors about 6 years ago. Went fully freelance a little over 3 years ago, and I'm super excited to write about craft beer, good hikes, all kinds of fun stuff to do here in the Pacific Northwest, and especially in Oregon. So Yeah, super stoked to be here tonight and excited to talk about some beautiful hikes. And then, so the first thing you're probably wondering is, do I need another hiking guidebook? That you probably have a few on your shelves, and the answer is yes. Of course you do. You probably need 2 copies, and here's why. When our editors first reached out to us a little over 2 years ago, it was really about finding the top hikes around the Pacific Northwest. 75 in Washington, 75 in Oregon. There's so much variety. If you're on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, it looks completely different from the Steens Mountain area in southeastern Oregon, but they're still the same region. So it's so much natural beauty. It was super exciting to write about how to really enjoy all of that. So there are 150 hikes in all, 112 campgrounds for, if you want to spend the night wherever you happen to be. We have itineraries for making a road trip out of it. And then we also have 10 top experiences that kind of sum up what makes the Northwest so special, so beautiful, and so worth exploring. But to talk about how to do that safely, I'm going to kick it back to Craig.
So, hey, I don't want to make get too lectury here. We just feel we're just going to throw this up real quick here, recreating responsibly. We just feel like it's super important at this moment in time that we kind of touch on this subject. That it's responsibility on our part to just touch on this real quick. What I have here, what Matt put together, this slide actually, are some come from a group of outdoor organizations have come together and kind of agreed on kind of some what we should be doing, some ideas to follow, called Recreate Responsibly. They've been adapted by the national parks, used by national parks and national forests and other parks as kind of a nice guideline for right now in the middle of a pandemic, and really some of them good advice for any time on what we should be doing right now. And I think, we can go through these, and a lot of them are common sense. And if you're an outdoors person and a hiker, you're probably doing a lot of these things anyway. This is a moment in time when we're getting a ton more people out there because there's not a lot else we can do. So I do think this little point here that that's added about building an inclusive outdoors is important right now, because we're as stewards of the outdoors. It's good to be inclusive, all the time, especially right now when we're seeing more and more people that are getting out there for the first time, or the first time in a long time. In terms of being healthy, I will tell you, we follow these same things we're following all day long anyway. It's usually a good way to go. I will tell you, I've gotten out way more than I usually do to hike this year, and 2 things that I've found that have been helpful are obviously looking for trails that aren't the most popular ones, but mixing up my 10 essentials a little bit in 2 ways. One is I've added a mask, so that's 11 essentials. I don't wear it all the time when I'm hiking, because most of the time my whole point is trying to be away from people. But I do slap that thing on when I'm near people out of respect for them, and because it's trying to be healthy. And the other thing is one of my 10 essential items I'm using way more than usual, and that is my headlamp. The reason for that being is I'm finding, and my wife, who is loves getting up at ridiculous hours and going hiking, we've found that we can hit some of the most popular trails by either going super early, I mean like the alarm going off at 2 a.m., 1:30, and hiking it at night and not seeing anybody on these super popular trails until we're on our way down, or going late in the day when the place is already cleared out, and then we end up watching the sunset and coming out at night. So those have been great. If you're looking for touching on this a little bit more, recreateresponsibly.org, or any of your favorite park, national park, state park, national forest websites touch on these in a little more depth. But we thought it was important for us to touch on that right away. But let's talk about the book. Matt, take it away.
Yes, awesome, thank you. So when Craig and I talked about this, we kind of went back and forth on ideas for what to talk about tonight. We didn't want to say here maybe the top 5 hikes in each state because those are probably pretty popular and might not be completely safe this summer and might not actually be open. So we talked about, we kind of settled on hikes that were kind of surprising to us, or that kind of gave us, you know, different perspectives to kind of reflect on. Yeah, we'll get started. The very first hike that that kind of blew my mind while researching this guide was the Little Belknap Crater hike in Central Oregon. And I think when we tend to talk about the outdoors in the Pacific Northwest, it tends to default to what's west of the Cascades, which is a lot of forest and coastline. We talk about what's east of the Cascades, which tends to be a little bit more desert-y or a little bit drier, more arid. But then what about the Cascades themselves? And in Central Oregon, that means lava flows, lots and lots of lava flows. And the Little Belknap Crater hike is a pretty easy hike to sort of get used to that and kind of experience that a little bit. It's about 5 miles round trip, about 1,000 feet of elevation gain. And the elevation is pretty steady. It never gets too steep. It's gradual, but it keeps going. So the Little Belknap Crater hike is probably about a half hour, 45 minutes outside of Sisters. One reason I really like this hike is because it has a pretty small parking lot, so it can never get too crowded, and it's pretty wide open, so there is room to get out of the way if you need to. So it's about a little over 2.5 miles to Little Belknap Crater, which is that reddish bump in the leftmost photo. This is on the final ascent to that moment. You're actually hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail on this particular section of hike. So you get to say, hey, I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. Kind of a fun little achievement. I would say not great for the dog. Largent probably wouldn't love this. You're on lava rock for the better part of 2 miles. It's jagged, it's difficult. There aren't a ton of great places to kind of, there's not a lot of smooth trail. Most of that's early on in the hike. But yeah, so you get up there, you get out into the middle of this miles-long lava flow, which was formed over the past 1,500 years by eruptions from Little Belknap Crater, and also visible not on this slide, but on the hike, Belknap Crater. So it's a lot of fun, and one of the cool things about it is you get to see a lot of truly amazing mountain peaks everywhere you look. In the center photo, you get to see the Sisters, you get to see Mount Jefferson, Washington, Black Crater, Black Butte, a few more that I'm sure that I'm missing. And even though it's an out and back, it's still a lot of fun because on the way up, you're kind of in the middle of all this lava flow, you're getting a feel for it. And on the way down, you just have these beautiful mountain peaks for 2 miles that are just in front of you. And it's absolutely stunning. If you do go to Little Belknap Crater, I would also say about a half mile away is the D. Wright Observatory, which was built in the 1930s as a civilian conservation corps project. That is in the rightmost photo. You can climb those stairs and head up to the top of the observatory, and it has a really cool peak identifier that helps you identify something like 12 to 15 peaks that are visible from that, that part of the Cascades. And then there's also a wheelchair accessible paved trail that goes through the lava flow and kind of explains, here's why this region looks the way it does. It's a really cool opportunity to kind of learn a little bit about how it came to be. So yeah, Little Belknap Crater, a lot of fun, pretty easy. It's unlike anywhere else in Oregon. So it's a lot of fun. And then the second hike that I wanted to spotlight tonight that I thought was worth featuring, it's actually kind of cheating. It's actually 3 hikes in one. This is the Sky Lakes Wilderness, which really, really blew me away when I started working on this book. I think in Oregon especially, once you start getting south of Crater Lake, which is where the Sky Lakes Wilderness is, it follows the crest of the Cascades, and it's probably, it is definitely south of Crater Lake. It's not nearly as well known. One of the things I really love about this region, so there are three hikes in this guide in the Sky Lakes Wilderness, and I couldn't choose just one. The Sky Lakes Wilderness is actually 3 different lake basins, and in the 1980s and 90s, the EPA did some studies and found that these lakes have some of the most chemically pure water in the world. So naturally, in summertime, it's a really popular swimming spot. Backpackers love it. None of the ascents are really that difficult. They tend to be pretty gradual. But yeah, so during the summer, it tends to get a little busy because everyone's swimming. But I would honestly say you get past Labor Day and traffic here just drops off a cliff. It's still beautiful. It's funny, you don't see many mountains. The lakes are the star of the show here. You don't really see many mountain peaks in any of these trails, but the lakes are just absolutely beautiful. And then once you get there in mid-September, you start getting some of this fall foliage and really bright, beautiful colors. It's a lot of fun to hike through and to witness. You can rack up some miles without, having a ton of elevation gain, and you get to enjoy these really cool lakes. So they're all pretty accessible, and yeah, a lot of fun. And then the third hike, or fifth hike, depending on how you're keeping track, is the Vista Ridge Trail to Owl Point. And I think probably the main reason that I was really surprised by this, and the main reason I was so stoked to include this hike, is because just look at that view. I mean, that says it all. I've done a lot of hikes on Mount Hood over the years, and this is probably one of the absolute best views, and it doesn't require much elevation gain. I'd say it's about 4.5 miles round trip. I think about 500-600 feet of elevation gain. And it actually has kind of an interesting backstory behind it. This trail was in disuse and disrepair for a really long time. And the Forest Service at one point, I think in the late 90s, early 2000s, said we would like to open this area up to motorcycle activity, open up Vista Ridge. And some hikers who had done this trail in the past thought it was really important to preserve. They decided to just maintain and keep the trail up on their own, sometimes to the chagrin of the Forest Service. So at a certain point, the trail became so popular, the Forest Service ended up reopening it, and that happened just a couple years ago. And it's really cool because you walk through kind of a semi-burned area of forest that was burned by the Dollar Fire several years back. And then you get up onto Vista Ridge, and all of a sudden you start seeing these little spur trails off to your right. They're about 50 feet each, if that. And you go out and you just get progressively better views of Mount Hood the further you go on. And then even when you can't see Mount Hood, you're on the ridge, you're surrounded by this really beautiful forest. You're in this, you're in these wildflower meadows. There's a lot of lupin, paintbrush. You'll see some trillium up there. You get to August, you'll see some huckleberries along the trail. It's really beautiful. And then you come around a corner, you see this giant pile of rocks. That's Owl Point. And this is the view. It's an incredible view. It's one you don't have to work very hard for. Yeah, so that one I really loved because the view is just completely wide open. You still get some outdoor experience, but it's also not a thigh burner of a hike. So, and then the next hike that really surprised me was the Anthony Lake to Hoffer Lakes hike. This one really knocked me for a loop because so this photo you see, this is Anthony Lake and that's Gunsight Mountain behind it. This is actually about 300 feet from the trailhead. You could literally walk from your car to the trailhead, walk another 300 feet, you're gonna get this view and it would be completely worth it because it's absolutely beautiful. But one of the things I really love about this hike is it follows the lake shore. You get these really beautiful views of the surrounding Elkhorn Mountains. And then as you leave the lake, you start to head up into the forest a little bit and you get to the Hoffer Lakes, which unfortunately I didn't include photos of in this presentation, but they are two alpine lakes that butt up against a granite peak. And so you kind of feel like you're really in the middle of just this huge, beautiful mountain range. It feels like there's no one around. One warning about this hike before I go any further, at Hoffer Lakes, as beautiful as it was, I have never felt so personally attacked by mosquitoes in my whole life. If I hadn't had my backpack weighed down with water bottles, they might have carried me away. It was a close call, touch and go there for a little bit. So if you do go to Anthony Lake and Hoffer Lakes in the early summer, whether it's this summer, next summer, whatever, just bring like enough mosquito repellent to bathe in and you'll be fine. But it is worth it because once you get past Hoffer Lakes, you start going through these really beautiful wildflower meadows, and then as the trail kind of loops back toward the trailhead, Gunsight Mountain and Anthony Lake are visible the whole time. It gets more and more impressive, and then you get back toward the lakeshore, this view opens up. So really, really beautiful trail. You get mountain lakes, you get peaks, you get wildflowers, all of it. So that was another one that just really surprised me. And it's about 3.5 miles round trip, about 500 feet of elevation gain. So it's not one that I think you might actually spend more time driving to the trailhead from LeGrand than you do on the trail. But there's a lot to do up there. You can paddle, you can fish, you can swim. There's a lakeshore trail that goes around the lake. So, they have a campground there. So lots of fun stuff to do around Anthony Lake. And this trail, I think, kind of gets at what makes that area so special. And then the fifth and final hike that I'm going to cover, honestly, who among us knew that there are redwoods in Oregon? Up until a few years ago, I didn't. But there are 2 groves, as far as I know, of redwoods in Oregon. 2 groves that are hikeable anyway. I really wanted to spotlight this because redwoods, I think, they're absolutely beautiful. And most of us associate it with like Redwoods National Park or Muir Woods near San Francisco. But in this particular case, there's a really cool trail that starts at Alfred Loeb State Park outside of Brookings. The trail itself is about 3.5 miles round trip, about 600 feet of elevation gain. The first half of it follows actually a myrtlewood grove, like they save the redwoods for the end. The myrtlewood grove, it follows the Chetco River. It's a really beautiful evergreen hardwood that is pretty commonly associated with the Southern Oregon coast. So you kind of follow that. It's a really peaceful, bucolic hike, and then you cross the road and you arrive at the Redwood Nature Loop, which is just jaw-dropping. These redwoods aren't as big as their more famous cousins in California. These redwoods are about 300 to 800 years old, whereas the ones in California are up to 2,000 years old. So they're not quite as impressive. I don't want to make you think that you're going to see the best of the best. But at the same time, some of the redwoods are more than 12 feet in diameter, more than 275 feet tall. And just one tree of this size is enough to build 8 2-bedroom homes. So really, really impressive trees. It's a pretty easy hike, really beautiful. And who knew that redwoods grew in Oregon? So it's a fun place to go. It never gets too busy. It's pretty relaxing hike. It's kind of far away from the crowds, and it's a few miles inland. So a lot of people who are traveling up and down 101, they don't make the trip. So it's a nice way to get away from the crowds. So that does it for me with these hikes. So I will turn it over to Craig, who is going to tell you all about the second most beautiful state in the Pacific Northwest.
Thanks, Matt. I was going to title this this slide Washington, like Oregon, just with bigger mountains. But instead, I decided to call it Fresh Perspectives on 5 Classic Washington Hikes. So when we were talking about this theme for today's presentation, I was thinking about a lot of the hikes I've done before, but I was thinking that I kind of left some of them with a different perspective after doing them for this book, for a variety of different reasons. For some, it was the history. For some, it was the experience. And one of them, I hadn't done it before. I'd put it off for over a decade just because of bad attitude on my part. But I'll get to that one in a second and tell you why I ended up loving it as one of my favorite hikes in the book. But let's start right here with Camp Muir. Camp Muir is a little over 10,000 feet up on Mount Rainier. It is an absolute amazing experience to go up there. I call them jetliner views when you get up there, because it can look like similar to the view you see when you look out of your airplane when you're approaching SeaTac or PDX. It is it's absolutely beautiful up there, and it's also one I've done this a lot, but it's one that I get a new perspective every single time I do it. And the reason why is because there is, and I know we just talked about this being a great time to get away from people, but there's always, you're gonna bump into people on this because it is the primary route for climbing the mountain. And I really enjoy, you can see these, the climbing services, you can identify them a mile away because there's a line of people going pretty slow, conserving their energy because they got a big day tomorrow to try and get to the top. So it's really, I find it enjoyable to kind of come alongside some of these groups and talk to them and hear what they're getting into. Here, some of them are nervous, some of them are excited, and you know, we'd swap stories. Some, you know, they'll sometimes I'll tell them about when I've climbed it. It's or they'll tell me about past times I've climbed it, and I really enjoy also. You know, coming down a lot of the times you run into mountain guides that are off duty. They're not working. They're either heading back to the car or they're heading back up to lead a guide, lead a trip. And some amazing conversations you can have with these guys that are really some of the best mountaineers in the world. Live, work, and train on Mount Rainier during the summer. It is a very can be a very challenging climb in some areas, and a lot of people that think it's not so hard. Really, part of the reason they don't think it's so hard is because those guides put in the routes that make it a little bit easier for everybody. So some really fascinating people. The last time I was up there, I walked off with a gentleman named Brent Okita, who holds the record for most times climbing Mount Rainier. At the time, it was about 520, which is a lot, guys. That's a lot. And I asked him, so what's impressive to you? If 520 is a ton, and he's like 2. Anybody willing to come back and do this a second time? That's crazy. So it is a cool climb. It's also probably the most challenging climb in the book. It's also, you should have route finding skills in case the weather comes in, because it can be deadly. People have died on here. You should know what you're doing, or be going with an experienced person on this hike, because you're getting right up to there to where the climbing starts. It's a spectacular hike, beautiful hike, and I'm gonna save my other story for this for another time. So let's move on. My second hike that I have on here is called Badger Mountain. It's over in the Tri-Cities. This is one I went to school over at Washington State University, and I worked for a summer in Walla Walla. And so I've driven by this thing a number of times, and it's right next to the interstate there in Richland. And to be honest with you, I would never have thought of it, that if I was going to write a hiking guidebook someday, that I would include it in there. But in my old job working at the News Tribune, I met a gentleman named Bill Painter. Bill Painter lived in Richland in one of these houses down here toward the bottom of the hill. This dude was a bona fide badass. He decided he wanted a swimming pool. He went out and with a shovel and dug a swimming pool in his backyard, full, normal swimming pool. The dude's a stud. He in his 80s and when he was 82 and 83, and then when he turned 84, each of those summers, he went up and climbed Mount Rainier each year, setting a record as the oldest person ever to climb Mount Rainier. So I asked him what he did to train. He'd dig swimming pools with a shovel for one, and he would climb Badger Mountain every day. 2,300 plus times he climbed it before he passed away about 5 years ago. I was on a road trip and coming back through, and I remembered him telling me, you got to climb it. So I went and I hiked up it, and it's beautiful. One, you get up there near the top, there's a little marker that talks about, ancient floods that used to carry this. And you look, and as far as you can see, you're thinking all the Tri-Cities and everything at one point was underwater. And it's just kind of staggering to think about that. But I think what's also really cool is the idea that this was not a protected piece of land until 2004, and that community you see down there loved this thing so much that they rallied to support this thing and protect it and make sure that they have a great hiking trail in this area with amazing views that's, you know, stretch when we're looking over the Columbia in this image, you can look over Oregon. You can, they made sure that they protected this for their families and for generations to come. And there's a lot of places like that in the Northwest that, you know, a lot of trails that really owe their existence to the community coming together and protecting them from development. My next hike, Mount Eleanor. I've done this one a number of times, and the one it's a spectacular hike. And I spend a lot of my hiking time in the Cascades, which is beautiful. And I remember that my first time coming up over here in the Olympics, climbing Mount Eleanor, I just was just stunned at how, you know, how different being on top of a peak in the Olympics is to being on top of a peak in the Cascades. That lake down there, Lake Cushman, is one of those things. Plus, it also, you have some pretty solid views of Mount Rainier when you're up there. As a quick aside, this is my wife hiking up here. She is a 100+ a day hiker. She's pretty insane how much she hikes. This little guy right here, I know some of you on here at least have, because you're, this little guy's gonna make a cameo in a minute. This guy's become a little bit of a Facebook celebrity. That's Largent. Largent the Adventure Dog is his full name. There's no commas, just like Winnie the Pooh. It's his full name. He loves hiking, and also, like my wife, puts in over 100 days a year and about over 200,000 feet of vertical a year. Crazy. So the thing that changed my perspective on Eleanor when I'm working on the book is sitting down and doing the research. It's beautiful. I know it's beautiful. It's classic. And so it had to go in there. It has to go in there for sure. But what I absolutely loved is the story about how it got its name. It's named for Eleanor Fauntleroy. It was named by the surveyor who named it. His name, Lieutenant George Davidson. He was engaged to her and really trying really hard. I don't think my father-in-law is on here, but he was working really hard to Dave, really working hard to impress his father-in-law. So he started naming stuff around the Puget Sound area after members of the family. So you got Fauntleroy Cove. If you've ever been on Puget Sound, you would catch one of the ferries you can catch out of the Fauntleroy terminal. You have the brothers are named after the Fauntleroy family. Mount Constance, Mount Rose are all named after the Fauntleroy, Fauntleroy's daughters. And the woman he's trying to marry, Eleanor Fauntleroy, that's where Mount Eleanor got its name. So I found that just to be a really cool, touching and somewhat funny story. And if my father-in-law is on here, sorry I didn't so much as even call you to ask permission to marry my wife. So, but you're welcome for taking her. The next hike I want to mention is Oregon Butte. So I did this one about 15 years ago with my son, who I know is on here because he was complaining that I left the cursor on the screen too much. Sorry, Alex. We did this about 15 years ago on the way to a Washington State University football game. And on the way back, he ran into, he came running out of the trailhead toilet screaming about seeing cat eyes. It's like, Dad, there's cat eyes in the toilet looking up at me. So I'm like, what are you talking about? And I go in there and there's a little bit of there was an owl trapped at the bottom of the toilet, kind of up a certain creek without a paddle. So I just always had a kind of a fond memories of this place because of that story. And we met on that trip, we met the, this fire lookout, not just a fire lookout, it's a manned fire lookout. There's a person who lives up there all summer long. And we met that person and had a great conversation with them. And so I just thought it was just such a cool experience. So I wanted to include it in the book. It's a pretty, pretty good effort to get to the trailhead. The hike itself is pretty easy. But you got to drive through Walla Walla and Dayton to get there, which is a long way from the bigger population centers in Washington. So I went back another, I guess 2 years ago, again, this time on the way back from a Washington State University football game, and hiked out there. And guess who was manning the fire lookout? The same person that was there the first time. And I recognized them. They obviously did not recognize me, but we talked for probably an hour and a half, just amazing stories that, just kind of changed the way, you can imagine a lot of what it must be like up there. But hearing the stories about, waiting out some pretty nasty storms, spotting fires, interactions with hunters and poachers, and how they went about that, pretty interesting. Having to hike down to the spring to get the water and bring that back up, great. And the one thing I did learn on that one, if you ever do visit a manned fire lookout deep in the wilderness, if you bring them fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, you got a friend for life. They're very appreciative of something like that, because a little bit hard to come by out there. All right, last hike I wanted to tell you guys about that kind of gave me a big perspective shift was this one right here, Dungeness Spit. Grew up going out there with my family quite a bit, out to the Squim area, doing a lot of fishing, but never did this hike. And then it's a classic. People talk about it all the time, being one of the best hikes in the state on the Olympic Peninsula. But I looked at it. It's a 10-mile hike. It's flat. You can see the end from when you start. You can see the lighthouse. And I'm like, oh, that just sounds flat and long. And I'm not against long, but flat and long, just for some reason, it's seems to be a little. I just had a bad attitude about this, so I was never going to do it. I took my son out there once. We hiked out about a mile, played on the beach, but I had to put it in the book because it's a classic. So it was the 75th of the 75 hikes I did for this, and I went out there and I put on my running shoes and I jogged a good portion of it. And pretty quickly I was struck by, the passing ships. I was passed by, the people that were turning around and the time that I, sorry, my Largent the adventure dog is running around making chaos behind me here. But just struck by everything that was going on. The birds, just tons of birds out there. It was amazing. And by the time I got out there, I was just like, my perspective had already changed. And so I went and it's a manned lighthouse. I went and I toured the lighthouse, and just was absolutely just so impressed by the history of this lighthouse that has been it's been in operation since 1857, and it's run by volunteers. And what's really cool about this is that besides just being just so peaceful and so beautiful and so scenic and such a cool experience, is that the volunteers, you can volunteer to man this lighthouse and lead the tours. However it's going to cost you. You can stay out there for a week for $420 a week, and on top of that, they're going to ask you to mow the lawn and water the lawn and all that. But it is absolutely shifted the way I felt about a long walk on the beach to just an absolutely one of my favorite experiences putting this book together. So at this point, I wanted to we're going to open it up to questions. I want to say thanks again for joining us. But if you have questions, let's go ahead and share those in the comment section, and Matt and I'll be more than happy to field those. But hey, let's get this out of the way here real quick. Well, he's running around. At some point, we're going to get the little guy. Here he comes. So I promised, for those of you guys, if you can see me here, can you see me there, Matt? Look at this guy. This is Largent, the adventure dog. He's adorable. He's become a bit of a hiking celebrity in Washington, and it's become a little bit crazy. We get I don't get recognized on the trail. This guy gets recognized on the trail. Dude, your hair tastes terrible. It's insanity sometimes that we see. My wife has told me about times, especially on a popular trail like Mount Si, how she'll get stopped and people will want to take pictures with our dog, which is crazy. Our little dog, the dude that poops all over my backyard, and strangers want to take pictures with him. He is adorable, I must say, but he's telling me what's that, buddy? Oh, he's a rescue dog, he tells me. And what's that? What else? Oh, he says follow me on Instagram. All right, don't shake your head, Matt. All right, so let's talk about questions here.
Hey, Craig.
And I'm gonna
real quick before we dive into the panelist questions. I actually had a question for you. Of all the 75 hikes, what was your favorite in the book?
I think my favorite. Come on, man. It depends on the day. For me, determining the favorite, I think, has to do with my state of mind at that day. It's kind of like a movie or something, right? It depends on how you feel that day. But that first one I showed you on there, Camp Muir, I think that one is just like every time I do that, it's beautiful, it's stunning. And since you set me up, I'm gonna tell the story. The last time I went up there, I bumped into a woman who I recognized because she's famous up there for doing not much more than just loving the mountain, hiking it, and being super nice. Her name's Branka Sundstrom. She was having problems with her a pole. She was in her pushing 90 at the time when I ran into her. She might have been 90 at that point. And she's absolutely an amazing person. She's climbed, done the hike to Camp Muir more than anybody but the guides. And I will tell you what, a friend of mine, Jason Edwards, who is a seventh summiter mountaineer, and I successfully led a little push to nominate and successfully get her voted into the Tacoma-Pierce County Sports Hall of Fame, which is going to happen, was supposed to happen last month, is going to happen next year because of the pandemic. But on top of everything about her being just an awesome person, she's an Auschwitz survivor, which just absolutely stunning, the people you meet. And I know a lot of times we're not trying to meet people when we're out there in the outdoors, but just the beauty of that place and the interactions with people on the Muir snowfield make it one of my favorite places.
Awesome.
What about you?
Well, Little Belknap Crater was probably the most mind-blowing of all hikes. But if I'm gonna go in another direction, since I've already talked at length about that, I think one that's near and dear to my heart is Cape Falcon on the Oregon coast. It's a part of Oswald West State Park, which is named for the Oregon governor who forever ensured that Oregon beaches would remain public and accessible. And the Cape Falcon hike, I think it's about 5.5 miles round trip. It's a pretty mellow elevation game, but it ends at this bluff kind of overlooking the ocean, this cove, Neahkawnie Mountain, really just incredible views of the Oregon coast. And you can sometimes see sea lions playing in the surf below. You can sometimes see, whales out to sea as they're migrating. So yeah, it's a really cool hike. And then when you is on your way back, you can take the junction to return to the trailhead. You can also go down to the beach in this cove and kind of spend a little time on the beach and hang out with your dog. It's a really popular place to go surfing. So yeah, it's a really cool corner of the Oregon coast, and it's probably the hike that I've done more than just about any in this book. So.
All right. So, hey guys, we're both looking forward to hearing your amazing questions. If you type those into a chat, we will go over them. I'm looking through here right now and I'm seeing one. What's the best hike near Olympia to do with a dog? Well, in the book, I think the closest hike to Olympia would be Mount Eleanor that we mentioned. That's a great one to do with a dog. I've done that with my dog, with Largent. Mount Rose, not in the book, but one of the Fauntleroy daughters, Largent's done that one. Those are pretty hilly. You're looking a little Eleanor steep. Rose has a lot of vertical. I would also say that you're also from the book, not too far from Olympia to get over to Rainier. No dogs in Mount Rainier National Park, of course, but right on the outside is High Rock. High Rock is short. It's uphill as well, but it is also just absolutely stunning. I described it in the book, and I described it to anybody. Yeah, Carol knows right there. It's gorgeous. It's almost like too gorgeous. You should have had to work harder to get there. It's so beautiful. You're right. Rainier's right in your grill. There's a fire lookout building right there. You can see Hood, Adams, St. Helens. It's absolutely gorgeous. And they're yeah, dog friendly. Let's see here. Next up, we have Irene. Do you have any urban hikes you like? Oh, I know a guy who wrote about several urban hikes in this book right here. His name is Matt.
Oh man, I would probably say my favorite in Portland is the Forest Park hike to Pittock Mansion. You start on the Lower Maclay Trail, and you meet up at the Wildwood Trail, which is about 30-something miles. You don't hike all of it, obviously, but it ends in Pittock Mansion. You get this incredible view of Mount Hood and the downtown Portland skyline. And it's just a 5-minute drive, 10-minute drive from downtown. It's like in the middle of Northwest Portland neighborhood. That's a lot of fun. And you get to pass what's called the Witch's House, which is this really interesting stone structure. It's like a stone house that is usually graffitied up to some degree, but it's still really cool. Turns out when it was built, it was a bathroom. So it's one of the nicer bathrooms you'll ever encounter, even if it's not operational anymore. But yeah, that was probably my favorite urban hike of this book. What about you? Did you have one, Craig?
Discovery Park in Seattle. It's you're getting a little busy right near during the pandemic, but it's really cool. Some military history there. You can hike through the woods. You can hop down to the beach. There's a little a little lighthouse down there. Lots of history. Some of it not worth being proud of. And you'll also see that there's actually a little community of houses in there where some people actually live inside the park, which would be nice. Yeah, it's great and easy to get to if you live in Seattle.
Cool.
Okay, John in San Francisco says, I just hiked over 150 miles in the Alaska tundra, and I'm curious if your book has any sweet hikes that don't cost $8,000. Well, I would say if you're looking for tundra, that and our book has the Burroughs hikes up on Mount Rainier out of Sunrise. Those hikes have those Burroughs have they're actually the signage up there will compares it to Alaska. You probably won't feel like you're at Alaska, but you paid $8,000 to go to the snout of a glacier. You could do that at Mount Rainier for the entry fee and about a 2-mile walk up to the Nisqually Glacier. That hike's in the book. You could also hit the Carbon River entrance for the lowest glacier in the contiguous United States. And full disclosure, John Hill is my mom's, the ugliest of her 2 sons. He was the guy who asked the question there. All right, who we got here?
All right. Did either of you, here going over to the QA module, did either of you sustain any injuries during your research? I didn't. Craig, did you?
Injuries? No, not, I don't think specifically for this. I've definitely hurt myself on some of these hikes at different times, specifically Mount St. Helens, hurt my knee on there pretty bad, and um, had to limp home, and then was kind of out of commission for a while, but recovered. Nothing, I can't think of anything really cool. No cool injuries.
So next question, Craig, did you have a favorite gorge hike and why?
I really enjoy, I'm trying to remember it. It's on the Oregon side. Is it Ponytail Falls? It's super short. I mean, like half a mile. And whenever we're there, we hop to it. It was one of those things where I was just like, oh man, how cool is it to be able to walk right behind a waterfall? And I just found that to be a really, really cool experience. I did enjoy Dog Mountain on the Washington side. It's so crowded, but I have been able to go down there and hit it. We went late in the day, during when the wildflowers were spectacular, and it's absolutely gorgeous.
Completely agree. It's a really beautiful hike, and yeah, there's a lot to see. And I would say my favorite gorge hike is, I'm always going to have a soft spot in my heart for Angel's Rest. It was the hike that got me into hiking back 14 years ago. It's a steady incline. It's a bit of a butt kicker. I think it's about 1,700 foot elevation gain in about 3 miles. But the view of the gorge itself, it's like a 270-degree view. You get to see Beacon Rock. You get to see into Portland. You get Cape Horn, all kinds of beautiful views from up there. Secret is definitely out on Angel's Rest. And I would say, and I think it's even closed right now, so that just full disclosure, a lot of gorge hikes are pretty much closed right now. So if you're interested in getting out to the gorge, definitely check with the land management agency before setting out. I know like Angel's Rest, that whole stretch along the waterfall corridor is closed right now. So take caution when heading out to the gorge right now. But yeah, as far as favorite hikes in the gorge, that one, I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for that one. So let's see. What's the next book on the horizon, and will it also be hiking? Craig, so I'm working on a guidebook to the Columbia River Gorge and Mount Hood, also for Moon Travel Guides. Currently trying to research that right now. There will be some hikes in the book, not 75, but there will still be some good ones, including some in the Washington side of the gorge that I get to do later this summer, fingers crossed. So yeah, Craig, what about you? What are you working on right now?
Well, I've been trying to take a break from writing. I am launching, just launched a website. The blog is going to launch here on August 15th by craighill.com. We're kind of using that to kind of capture and tell some of the stories that, just looking for a home to put a lot of the stories and outdoor related stories experienced over the years, and some that I haven't been able to tell before through platforms like my time where I got to tell write a weekly column. So that's kind of what I'm doing there. I do some work for some magazines and stuff, but really feel like I just need to go take some time to go hiking and without having to write about it.
Never a bad thing, that's for sure.
Yes. You got a question about beer?
Yeah. So I'm happy to go ahead and tackle that one first. My favorite beers at the moment, Fort George, their annual 3-way IPA, their summer beer that they did with Structures in Bellingham and Level Beer in Portland. It's just a solid IPA, really good, really enjoying that. Then Little Beast, they just released their entry or their contribution to the Black is Beautiful collaboration, which raises money for causes that are really important for criminal justice and social justice right now. They just released is an imperial stout, a cookies and cream stout that is really good. It's tastes like dessert. It's a really fantastic beer. So that's what I've been sipping on lately.
So I will, I would just like, one of my favorite, most surprising stops involved beer, but it was root beer. In Issaquah, after hiking Poo Poo Point, I dropped into a place called, and it's in the book, Triple X Burger, retro drive-in, great burgers, and the most amazing root beer I've ever had. I was a little dehydrated. That might have played into it, but they said it was a 1930s era recipe. It was great. So
cool. So unfortunately we're getting close to 7 o'clock. I would be happy to continue answering questions all night, but I'm sure the Powell's folks would like to go home at a certain point. Real quick, so Craig, one of the questions in here was if people want to keep up with your adventures online, what's the best way to do that?
we're going to start, bycraighill.com is up. You can drop in on Instagram, Chill News on Instagram. I'm on Twitter at Adventure Guys. I know it's a lot of stuff, but all of those places. The blog will start middle of August. I'm going to type that in here, but yeah, all of the above.
Cool. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Wastro. That's W-A-S as in Sam, T as in Tom, R-O. Just where I post pretty pictures of the outdoors and news about what's new in the outdoors. Share links to some of my stories. So that's there. And then I think we probably have time for one more question, which, sorry, we're going to say.
I was looking at this one right here.
Yeah.
What hike would you recommend for somebody with a physical disability?
Yeah.
It would depend on the disability, but there are several in the book that have ADA trails, and the one that comes to mind first off is up at Maple Pass up in the North Cascades. There's a great, at that trailhead, there's a great little paved trail that goes out to a beautiful lake. And you, so there are definitely, that's the first one that pops into mind for me. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I'd say, and actually the first one that pops into mind is a trail that I talked about, the Lower Maclay Trail to Pittig Mansion. The first, I think, quarter mile, maybe a little bit longer, is ADA accessible. It's paved, it's flat. And even if you're not going up to Pittig Mansion, you still get some really nice views of Balch Creek, which runs along there. It's a really beautiful forest to be in. You'll see a lot of beautiful trillium growing alongside the trail. So yeah, that's one that is, even though you're in Portland, you feel like you're a world away. So it's a really nice hike.
So I'd say, Joe, you have a good question here about multi-day hikes and checking in to find out what's open because of COVID. What I'm going to say is contacting the Forest Service, national parks, or whoever you are, whatever area you're thinking about, and checking in with them is always good. Their websites are, I'm noticing some of them are really good about, most of them are good about updating. Not only are they open, but the snow levels up there as well. But definitely worth checking right now because there is stuff that's closed out there. Have we ever hiked together? That is a great question. The answer to that is no. We tried a couple of weeks ago, but we couldn't meet up.
It'll happen one day.
Somebody named my mom says, would you tell us about your author's picture in the book? Oh, okay. So that question, yeah, so here's the deal. If some of you guys saw the picture, I'm not going to put it back up because we're running low on time, but I decided, I thought it was funny. It would be funny if I put I see a lot of guidebook authors who like pose with their notepad, like they're taking notes. I decided, looking at those, I thought it'd be funny if I hauled a typewriter up to the top of a peak or out into the woods and posed with my typewriter. And so that's what I did. And the publisher, I was afraid they weren't going to use it, but she emailed me back right away and said she laughed so hard she snorted at her desk. So she made the effort to make sure that was in there. Thomas, hey, this is an important one. Matt, tell Thomas why beer is in the title. You haven't talked about it yet.
Oh yeah.
We have, but probably not until after Tom made that comment.
Sure, that's a fair question. Real quick, so with just about every hike in this book, there's a little text box that says here's where to go for either a bite to eat or, in a lot of cases, a cool beer afterwards. So yeah, and we even have some hikes that like paired with breweries, like, hey, this is a really great hike or a really great brewery to go to after a hike. So yeah, a lot of, being in the Pacific Northwest, we're inundated with good beer, and just because you're outdoors doesn't mean you have to miss out. So there are a lot of solid recommendations for where to cool off afterward.
All right.
All right. I think everyone will just have to stay tuned for when you two write your guide when you do all of your hikes together.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the next one. We're gonna second edition. We're gonna switch them up. I'm gonna do the Oregon side.
All right, well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for tonight's event. It was a pleasure to host Craig Hill and Matt Wastradowski and welcome all of you. Please consider purchasing a copy of Pacific Northwest Hiking by visiting us at powells.com. While you're there, please be sure to check out our lineup of other upcoming virtual events, and we look forward to seeing you at another one of our events soon.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate it.